Welcome to another episode of Kick Unhealthy Relationships to the Curb. I am your host, Stephanie McPhail. My wonderful co-host, Steve, is not able to make it today, but we're going to try our best to have a really great show and be able to share some really great information with all of you. I was lucky enough last week to meet someone who's been following this show for a while, and he said something kind of funny that I wanted to bring up, he asked me if I ever helped men heal from toxic relationships as well. And I think that was such a great question because so often we do focus on, relationships that females are having that we don't often talk about men that are also dealing with toxic relationships. And so I just wanted to bring up, I do end up talking about a woman's perspective very often because that was my perspective in healing from toxic relationships. However, we definitely have some men that have had some amazing results. And in fact, several days ago, I had a former client of mine reach out and tell me that where he started from being super depressed and actually like suicidally depressed, unbeknownst to me when he started, actually went from there to now in a super happy relationship with someone he goes on adventures with. He gets to do fun things with. They're actually making all these trips and all these plans to do really great things. And he actually told me, number one, he could have never imagined how his life would be before he started to do the work and before he started to focus on himself. But number two, he's now with a partner who loves and respects him and he enjoys spending time with, where they actually have never even had a fight. They've been together now for about a year. They haven't had a fight and they've actually gotten really good at communicating together. And so I wanted to share that because I think so often we focus on one part of the healing and we don't talk about why we do all the healing, what all that hard work is. And I want to make sure that as you are watching this, as we bring out all these guests and we talk about all this stuff, this literally can be for anyone. I don't want anyone to watch this show and be like, I wonder if it's possible for me. The whole thing is that what we hope everybody learns is that it is possible for anyone to heal. We need to make sure we not only get the right support, but number two, we take action. And having that action plan and knowing what we need to do will take a lot of the guesswork out. So on that note, what I would like to do is I would like to welcome our guest, Beth, to the show. Beth, come on in.
Hi, Stephanie.
Oh, maybe we're lagging. Oh, there we go. Hey, Beth.
Hi.
How are you? So glad to have you here on the show today.
I'm doing good.
Tell us a little bit about, well, first of all, what are your thoughts about, men healing versus women healing from toxic relationships? Have you experienced men dealing with that kind of stuff as well?
Absolutely. And I completely agree. It goes both ways. Anything that is for a woman is also for a man because we're all human beings.
Yeah. And women, we want men that have done healing work themselves too. So if you're on the fence and you're like, should I do it? Is it okay for me to get help? Realistically, if everyone can focus on working on themselves and healing those parts of us that have gotten trapped, the whole world could be such a better place. So Beth, tell us a little bit about your story and where you're coming from.
So I was raised in a conservative Christian home, similar to Amish and Mennonite, but not Amish and Mennonite. And I got married when I was 20 to someone who had also been raised in a home similar to mine of the same beliefs in the Old German Baptist Brethren Fellowship. And unbeknownst to me, when I got married to him, he was a pornography addict. So here I am, newly married at 20 years old. I don't know that my new husband is a pornography addict, but I very, very quickly realized that something is wrong. And I ended up being married to him for 23 years. And in that 23 years, there was sexual abuse, there was religious abuse, physical, mental, emotional, financial, so many different kinds of abuse. And not all of it was towards me, but some of it was also towards our children. So I ended up separating from him about 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago. And our divorce was final in February of this year. And as soon as I separated from him, I started working on healing. I knew I had been in survival mode for all of my children's growing up years, and I had missed a lot of their milestones, a lot of their just a lot as a mother. And I was actually crying about this morning because there's so much that I missed of my children's childhood because I was in survival mode and I was unable to be truly present with them. And that really hurts my heart. But I'm now have done tons of healing work, continue to do healing work every day, and I'm thriving. My life is abundant in many different ways. I lost relationship with my oldest daughter, and I have regained relationship with her and continue to rebuild that relationship with her. I lost relationship with my oldest son, have regained relationship with him, and continue to build that relationship with him as well. And then my youngest two children who are still at home, we're continuing to do the healing work too.
Thank you. My kids were yelling, talking about kids being at home. Thank you for sharing that. I think, talking about religion and some of the experiences people have had because of some of the, we'll say, strictness. And I'd like to kind of like get in your brain a little bit. Someone who grew up in a very strict religious upbringing, married to someone who grew up with the same kind of upbringing, you notice right away, you're 20 years old, you're newly married, you learn quickly that he's got a porn addiction, he's got all these other things. How did you feel about sharing your experience with the church or with your family? Like, was that anything you wanted to tell, or like, how did you deal with all that?
Well, I didn't realize right away that it was a porn addiction. I just knew that on our wedding night, he did his thing, rolled over and went to sleep. And I was like, what in the world? And the next morning at breakfast, like I literally choked back tears trying to eat food, knowing that I'm stuck there. I can never get out of this because divorce is very, very taboo. and definitely you don't remarry if you do get divorced. And so I had this feeling of I'm stuck. I can never get out of this. What have I done? And I remember sitting there eating breakfast, trying to not cry because I felt like there was no way out for me now.
Did you ever think of suicide?
Suicide was never something I thought of doing. No.
I just wonder, because when you feel stuck like that, I mean, and I'm so glad that you didn't get to that place. But I like, so many people, when they feel stuck, when they feel trapped and they're like, there's no way out, that starts being a thought that pops into their head. And I give you a lot of credit you were like, I need to keep going. That's beautiful. How did you deal with those like day-to-days of just literally dealing with this toxic partner?
Well, it was about 2 years into our marriage that he came to me and he confessed that he looked at pornography. And I was the dutiful little Christian wife. I forgave him. We got on our knees. We prayed. He repented with tears, everything. And we continued on. And it was another couple of years that he came to me again and confessed that he was still looking at pornography. And I again forgave him. But that time it was like, okay, there's really something wrong. And so we actually went to a minister of the church and told him, this is what we're dealing with. And in that meeting, he told that minister that he looked at pornography because I wouldn't have sex with him. And looking back at that now with some age and some wisdom, 20 years later, I'm like, why was he not called out and told, hey, dude, listen, you look at pornography, you should be taking care of your problem and her problem will disappear. Because no woman that I know of, unless there's really a trauma bond, wants to have sex with someone who's raping her. And so instead, I was told you need to be having sex with him every day, as many times as he wants it, to help him with his pornography addiction. Well, as you can imagine, that didn't work. Like, shock, that didn't work. Instead, all it did was made me feel used like an object. And it really hurt me as a woman that now I'm an object for his pleasure There was nothing in it for me. And that my only value, my only worth is to give him sex. When there should be so much more to a marriage and to a relationship within a marriage.
Well, 100%. I can't believe, like, 20 years ago, was not that long ago. To the fact that there are still ministers or just people in general out there saying that, like, that's the advice that they gave, is to say, well, basically it was your fault. And he agreed. It sounds like the minister agreed, like, yeah, it's your fault just because you don't give him enough sex. So therefore just give it to him. So he's basically saying, just allow your body to be used for his pleasure. What you want doesn't matter. I bet he didn't even ask what you wanted out of anything.
No, he simply stated, my belief is that you should have sex every day as a married couple, and you need to just give him more sex so that he'll be satisfied and not look at pornography.
Now, did you ever talk to your parents? Like, were they aware of anything that was going on?
I did not start opening up about his pornography addiction until we had been married 14 years, our 15th anniversary. Right around our 15th anniversary, we were separated, and he moved back home about 4 or 5 months later, right around our 15th anniversary. And it was in that 14-year mark that I finally started talking about what I had been living with and dealing with. And no one knew how bad it was. They knew that I was not present. They knew that I was in survival mode. They didn't put it in those words, but they knew that something wasn't right, but no one knew what was wrong because I didn't start talking until 14 years. And that's on me. I totally take responsibility for that. But at the same time, I also had tried to talk to some people about some things that were wrong in my marriage and was shut down. Like, told, well, we don't talk badly about our husbands. We don't, there's that whole being submissive, and we can't talk badly about your husband because he's your head, and, all of that kind of thing. And so I had tried to talk to some peers, but was shut down. And I think nobody even wanted to hear it because they didn't know how to handle it. And potentially it hit too close home.
Well, and it makes you wonder how many other people in the community were struggling with something similar and nobody talked about it either.
Right. And I now know, I have talked to a few in that community, and I now know that there is a big problem within that community.
Now, do you think there is a way to help give women more of a voice in this kind of situation, especially in that kind of community? Or do you think it's kind of just, is it going to just stay that way because of how they feel about the difference between men and women? Like, what are your thoughts about fixing that?
I definitely think there's a way to give women a voice, for sure. But I also know part of the reason I didn't speak up was, number one, I didn't recognize that there was such a thing as marital rape. I just realized that in the last 5 or 6 years, that there is such a thing as marital rape, and that's what was done to me. So I think there's the aspect of not having the words to give to what may be happening in their marriage. Mm-hmm. There's also the aspect of shame. It is very shameful to realize what you've been married to. And then the question becomes, well, if I was married to him who does this, what kind of person does that make me? Mm-hmm. And so shame tends to shut us down until either someone speaks into our life and says, hey, that's his choices. It doesn't reflect on you and who you are as a person, because he's an entirely separate person. Or until, if you are a believing person, like for me, it was like this thunderbolt at one time that suddenly hit me. None of this is your fault. He's the one making these choices. And the weight just fell off of me. And that's kind of when things started to turn around for me, mm-hmm. was realizing that it wasn't my fault. It wasn't because I didn't give him sex that he looked at pornography, because he revealed in that meeting he looked at pornography since he was 12 years old. I didn't meet him till we were 18. Mm-hmm. That wasn't my fault. And so when that like, it was just like God said, Beth, it's not your fault. You need to understand this. It's him making these choices. I think it's really hard to speak up because there is so much shame involved in that.
Well, and, I think that's one of the things too. I mean, for one, there's there's the pornography, there's the rape, there's the abuse, there's the mental anguish, there's all these other things that go along with it. There's maybe not even having the tools to begin with to even be able to explain what's going on. And then, and then there's just then there's that feeling of once you get married, you stay married. And, so often that guilt that comes around of wait a minute, I said that I would be married. If I break a promise, then I'm the one who's wrong. So then it's you get stuck into this loop, and I'd love to hear your perspective, but we get sucked into this loop of well, I need to make it work because I made a promise, and we're very good at making and keeping our promises, especially when it comes to something that we feel so strongly about. And then am I a failure if I can't make this work? Was that your experience?
Definitely. That whole loop. So we as a couple left the Old German Baptist in 2007, 7 years after we were married. And our faith took a little bit of a different route. And I started studying divorce from a biblical perspective and realized God doesn't hate divorce. He hates abuse that leads to divorce. He hates lust that can lead to affairs and pornography addictions that leads to divorce. It's not the divorce itself that he hates. Yes, does he like it that a family's been broke apart? No, definitely not. That's not his plan for us. But he's not against it happening for the safety of, in my case, his daughter. I'm a beloved daughter of God, and he doesn't want me to be abused in these ways, in any way, especially by the man who said he would love and protect me.
And that's a big one, because I think that so many people, when they are Christians or their faith says get married, stay married, there is this feeling of I need to stick around because of this promise, where I don't think that there should be any religion that's but it's okay if you beat your wife or rape your wife or, abuse your wife in any way, shape, or form. That's not what a relationship, a marriage should be. A partnership between two people that are raising, having your family and living life together, having that experience together, not one person, abusing the other one and the other one having to take it. That's not, I don't think we were meant to live that way ever.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. I mean, if we read Leviticus, there's all kinds of things that say these are not the ways that you live. Mm-hmm. Deuteronomy specifically says that a young man that's newly married is not to go out to war. He's to stay home with his wife for at least a year to mm-hmm. bring her joy. Well, if he gives a commandment like that, is it really okay for a woman, a wife, to be abused, or even a man? Because I know that there are men who are abused by women. Mm-hmm. So is it ever okay for someone to be abused? Absolutely not. That's not the kind of God that he is. He's a loving God.
Well, and I ask myself this too, is, if we are here for a purpose, then we're not doing our purpose if we are just in survival mode with this toxicity.
Absolutely. Yes.
So what would you say, let's say someone right now is where you were 10 years ago, and they're struggling and they're not sure, and they're saying, but what about the kids? What about my vows? What about all these other things that are coming around? I mean, again, this is a little bit of a different perspective than we normally talk about, but this is a real issue that a lot of people are dealing with. So what would you say to someone who's where you were a few years ago?
Well, the first thing I would say is you're not alone. For sure, you are not alone. There are way too many of us out there. Mm-hmm. I literally meet women all the time who, if I share a little bit of my story, because I've discovered that if I'm vulnerable and I open up and I share just a little bit, it allows another person to realize that I'm safe, and they will open up and share things that they've never shared with anyone else before. Mm-hmm. And so You're not alone is the first thing I would say to you. The second thing I would say is, this is not your fault. Whether he was looking at pornography before you married him, whether he started looking at pornography after you married him, I don't care when he started looking at it. It's still not your fault, no matter what he tells you. And here's why I say this, and I say this with lots of love, and I say it very emphatically, very assertive here. He's making the choice to look at the pornography. He's making the choice to be a user and to break your wedding vows with adultery, because that's what pornography is. It's adultery. It's his choice. You're not making him do anything. So no matter what he tells you, it's not your fault. I just want that to get so deep in someone's bones. It's not your fault.
Yeah.
He has a choice.
And I mean, that abuse, and they're so good at manipulating, right? As saying like, I'm doing this because of you, and they're not taking responsibility, and they keep, breaking you down so that you feel trapped and stuck and embarrassed and ashamed and all these things. But it's theirs. It's their shame that they're just putting on their partner.
Yes. One thing that I recently said to someone about addicts is that they are chameleons. They will change their colors for whoever and whatever they think needs to be in that moment. Mm-hmm. So we often call it a mask. The mask will come off after a period of time. But I think they're master manipulators, smooth talkers. I know my former spouse was very smooth talking. And it takes time for that kind of stuff to come out. Mm-hmm. Even though I had dated him for 2 years, it was a long distance relationship. So it takes time to see these things.
Yeah. I mean, you were so young too. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that I always want people to find themselves before they get committed into a relationship. And so often we don't, especially when we are, in a religious upbringing, and it's like, okay, well, I need to get married. This is what I need to do in order to do the right thing. And so someone shows interest and we're like, okay, they seem like they're good. We have the same faith. We have the same interests, and then reality kicks in because they were saying the right things, but we didn't know who they really were. And we didn't really know who we were either, or what we needed for ourselves.
Well, there's that aspect of it, but there's also the aspect of 24 years ago when I got married, the internet wasn't as large as it is now.
True.
And we didn't know that we needed to be asking these questions about pornography use. Mm-hmm. It was more magazines and pictures, and there wasn't the videos and the stuff that you can find online now. And so we didn't have the knowledge and the understanding then that we have now.
Mm-hmm. Well, and even now, like I don't, it's not probably something that you'd think of in some of the first several dates of like, so what's your porn use like? Or,
well, actually, I have dated 2 men, and I actually have. Before I ever started dating either one of them, I have asked them questions, very specifically told them this is why I'm asking. And it's very uncomfortable to ask men that you don't know very well, potentially, these questions, but you want to know what you're going into.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I was alluding to before, is like, when you do know yourself and you know what you want, those things that are really important, you have to ask those questions, because you can't be surprised down the road when they're showing all this other side of them, but you never talked about it. But if you know really well, like, I absolutely don't want this, like drug and alcohol use, or like, whatever the things are that are your like absolute no's, you have to be aware of what that is so that you can go in aware, not blinded because of the attraction that's there.
Right. Yes.
So tell us a little bit. I know this time always goes so fast. Tell us a little bit about what you do now, and then maybe how people can get a hold of you.
So what I do now is I support women who have been sexually betrayed by their husband to help them get out of survival mode. So that entails journaling. I know a lot of people don't like to journal, but journaling is so important helps get thoughts out of your head. And it's safe. I help them set priorities. Like a lot of women, when they make discovery about their spouse's pornography use, they start compulsively checking his computer, checking his phone, asking where he's been, who he's been with. And that is not healthy. And so I help them set priorities. I help them set boundaries. I help them decide what direction they want their life to go, and to help them get out of survival mode and start living a life of abundance and thriving, because Jesus came to give us an abundant life. He did not come so that we could be bound in chains of survival mode and intrusive thoughts and nightmares and all of those things. He came to give us an abundant life, and that is in all areas of our lives. Excellent. So you can,
no, sorry, go ahead. Keep going.
So you can get a hold of me on my website, bethbrunk.podia.com, or email me at coach@bethbrunk.com.
Awesome. So, I mean, anyone, if this resonates for anybody, again, we don't really talk about this subject as much or that often. I think we've had one or two guests that had, stories that were kind of in the same realm or similar realm, because it's never exactly the same. But this is something that happens. It's happening now in this country. It's been happening for a very long time. So if you feel like you're stuck, if you feel like you're trapped, or what Beth said resonated for you, please make sure you check out her website, and you can always send her an email and ask her questions. What is one thing you'd like to leave the audience with before we say goodbye?
Oh, one thing. That's so hard. But I mentioned it earlier. It's not your fault. And if you're a believer, and even if you're not, but if you're a believer, your husband looking at pornography invites the enemy into your home. I told my former spouse, I don't know how many times, it's like you opened the door wide and you just said, come on in, you're a welcomed guest. And even if you're not a believer, him looking at pornography affects you. You as a woman can sense that something's there, something's not right. There's more in your bedroom than should be in your bedroom, or there's more in your marriage relationship than should be in your marriage relationship. But you just might not be able to put your finger on what it is. So it affects you, but it also affects your children. I have reaped the horrible things of this pornography addiction on my family. And it's something that I will be dealing with for a very long time.
Well, you heard it. I mean, this is the time to do the work, and to get the help is now. Don't put it off. Don't wait, because the sooner that you get help, the sooner you can get your kids help, and the better off you'll be. So thank you, Beth, so much for coming and talking with us tonight. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for watching our show. We will see you next week. Hopefully, Steve will be back next week. And never forget, you are way stronger than you realize. Bye, everybody.